This week on Break It to Make It.
The inner critic, as adults, we're never taught as children how to manage that inner dialogue, that nasty, I'm talking the nasty inner dialogue, the one that tells you, you're not good enough or you need more of something just to be worthy. And, all the dialogue that goes on. And who do you think you are to be there? And, quit because you're never going to make it. Everyone else is better than you. And we're never taught how to manage that dialogue. So what happens as adults, we give that inner critic, it's like the American Express card and say, go. You have no limits, just go.
Hello and welcome back to Break It to Make It, where every week we meet amazing people who've thrown out the rule book, failed forwards, or taken the road less traveled to come out on top. If you're a high achiever, you've probably heard it said that no one's harder on you than you. If you're listening to this, I want to know, do you set impossibly high standards for yourself? Do you think that you'll be judged a failure if you don't rise and grind like everybody else? Or maybe you're trying to fit a mold based on standards that are held by society or your family that you just don't seem to fit and you can't stop beating yourself up about? That means that your inner critic might be holding you back. But what if I told you that you could reprogram it to help turn that inner critic into an inner guide, a more positive force in your life, rather than a little voice that's always telling you you're never good enough, you're never going to be able to make it? Well, today's guest, I'm very, very excited because she's going to help teach us how to make that transformation. She currently supports high-achieving, ambitious people tame their inner critic, heighten their confidence, and overcome imposter syndrome. She's a teacher, mentor, coach, a former radio host who has banished her inner corporate yes girl and is now the proud owner of a bold voice. Please welcome to the show, Kim Boudreau Smith. Hi.
Hi, Fallon. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited. Thank you for making this time and creating this space for a really important conversation and something that a lot of us struggle with. Now, Kim, I know that 14 years ago, you had a literal wake-up call that set you on this path. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, and it was literal. So I'm going to point this way, about a mile from my home, a little over a mile and a half here from my home. It was a beautiful August sunny afternoon. I was driving home and came to an intersection, red light intersection. So it's eight lanes, 4 lanes south, all the way downtown Detroit, 4 lanes north, coming all the way out into the suburbs. And I got to that red light and I felt my head go like this, fall forward and then come back up. And I did it again and came back up and I went, oh, shit. And I looked around. First of all, I looked around to make sure no one saw me because I was so worried that someone saw what I did. And then the second thing, which should have been the first, was, oh my gosh, am I still in the same place? Did I roll out in the intersection? Have I hurt someone? Did I hurt myself? And thank God I didn't hurt myself or anyone else. But I literally fell asleep at a major intersection. And if my foot would have came off the brake, I would have been in the major intersection. And thank goodness I didn't. I couldn't wait. It was like almost like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz that day, clicking the ruby red slippers. Like I was in a red Volkswagen Jetta at the time. I couldn't wait I couldn't drive home fast enough to get to safety. And I did make it home with full blast air conditioning, windows rolled down, and Aerosmith cranked up real high to keep me awake. But I made it home.
That is so amazing. And I'm so thankful that you made it home and that nobody was injured. But for somebody to get to that point, you must have been exhausted. What was going on in your life?
Well, I wasn't exhausted. I mean, I didn't feel tired. Like the night before, it wasn't, hey, Fallon, I only got 4 hours of sleep and I'm cranky when I only have 4. I got to have my 8 hours of sleep. It wasn't anything like that. In fact, I had no idea that I was tired. So I was shocked when my head fell forward. And it wasn't at that time in my business. It wasn't like I was working around the clock on those timelines, how sometimes we can get on those timelines as business owners. nothing like that. It literally, I got in my house. I stood there in my family room. The dogs were greeting me. I'm hanging onto my purse and I was going, I'm in trouble. And it took that afternoon of making a couple phone calls. I knew I needed help because I couldn't get out of this myself, where I sat down and went, wow. Every morning, I'm a morning person. Like right now in this time change that, this time of the year, I'm like 4:15, 4:30. I'm up and out the bed. Let's conquer the world by 8. And then, noon, I'm, taking a nap, but I'm up early. But here's what I would do. I would lay there in the bed, it's semi-dark, and I would look at the ceiling and I would go, what's my schedule like today? So I can come back to bed. I'm not even out of bed and I'm already thinking, when can I come back to bed? So I was living without lust or, luster of life and passion, and also a lot of lack of clarity. So needless to say, my inner critic was ginormously huge.
And, when you've got a lot of that internal turmoil, your brain, especially women, we tend to ruminate. We might not be busy in the body, but the brain is just sucking all the power. And it just gets deep into our bones. You mentioned that inner critic, and for those people who are listening who know you lovingly, or maybe not so lovingly, refer to that voice as the hag in the attic. So who is the hag, and how do we recognize them?
Well, first of all, we all have an inner critic. Let's just get down to it. And I just refer to mine as a hag in the attic. And because I refer to her as hag in the attic because she is a hag in the attic. I've got clients that call her different names, Bitch and Betty, and the bitch, I have so many different names. So the inner critic, as adults, we're never taught as children how to manage that inner dialogue, that nasty, I'm talking the nasty inner dialogue, the one that tells you, you're not good enough, or you need more of something just to be worthy. And, all the dialogue that goes on, and who do you think you are to be there? And, quit, because you're never going to make it. Everyone else is better than you. And we're never taught how to manage that dialogue. So what happens as adults, we give that inner critic, it's like the American Express card, and say, go. You have no limits, just go. So we give that voice carte blanche to dominate and control us and to keep us small. In my case, taking me into a deep sleep at a major red light. And what we need to be doing is managing the dialogue, not controlling. Don't want to kick her to the curb. Here's what mine will do if I kick her to the curb. So anyone listening who's raising children, try and out scream a teenager. I've never raised children. I hear it's impossible. It's the same thing with the inner critic. Kick her to the curb. She's going to come back 10 times bigger on steroids. We just need to learn how to manage her.
It's interesting that you talk about management, and if you try to fight against it, what we feel inside often becomes reflected outward. And so can you tell us a little bit about how that inner hag, if repressed or unrestrained, or however we want to phrase it, can lead to an outer hag or some sort of external manifestation?
Have you ever been around highly toxic people?
Absolutely.
That's that internal where they're taking external, and excuse the expression, but they're literally puking and projecting what's going on inside. The other thing is when that voice, that inner critic, is chiming up a storm. I look at my inner critic as the conductor of the orchestra, and she'll point and say, okay, lack of confidence, you're on. Lack of self-worth, you're on. Oh, Bunny, player small, you are on. So a lot of that external projection is we'll play small. We'll sit as tables as women. We'll hold our voices back. We will not speak up because maybe there's more men in the room, or maybe there's all women in the room and we're comparing ourselves. So we'll sit back. A lot of times we'll go and get more degrees when we already have the alphabet soup of letters after our name, and we don't need any more. So a lot of that inner critic will show up in our behaviors. It will also show up through stress. disease. My case, like I said, I fell asleep. I didn't think I was even tired that day, and I fell asleep. The other thing is that stress that plays such depth on us. It comes up in so many different ways. I mean, flus, colds, heart palpitations, stomach issues, anything like that that goes on up here that we're not managing will show up externally like that.
Yeah. Something my father always says is if you ignore your body, at some point it will force you to pay attention. And I think that's something that's really common. And I've definitely been the victim of that myself. I used to proudly say I hardly ever get sick. But then I realized that when I did, it was bad. So when I did get sick, I'd end up hospitalized. And so now I've really tried to make a little bit more of a concerted effort around taking the time to relax and recoup. People will say it's just a cold, but if you don't take the time, your body keeps receipts.
Yeah,
We'll bring it up later.
yeah, we need to recharge our battery. I beg your pardon. I didn't mean to cut you off there. We need to recharge our battery. I'm a big proponent. There's some days I'll take a break from my office and go sit out in my family room, and before you know it, I close my eyes for about 10 minutes. Do you know how many people? Yeah, that's lazy. I can't take naps. Well, I think that recharges my body and keeps colds and flus at a bay by doing something like that. So it's a lot of that societal pressure that she takes on up here. Like I said, orchestrating, and we wear it. We wear it like my favorite pair of Athleta yoga pants.
We absolutely do. And, one of our guests this season is the incredible Lisa Danforth. And she talks a lot about something that I know that you're also a fan of, which is the power of the pause. And however we choose to take it, we deserve it and we owe it to ourselves. And that inner critic, that you're lazy, you're that, you're this, never the right thing, mind you, is really can hold us back from reaching our full potential. And so if a hag can hold us back, can she ever help us? So I was talking to my husband about how excited I was to spend time with you today as we were driving our children to school. And he said, the inner critic, he talked a lot about professional athletes. Now, there have been studies to show that professional athletes and lots of people who are incredibly high performers in the top of their field have incredibly low self-esteem. They have a loud and noisy inner hag that they've somehow been able to harness to drive them to greatness, on the world stage. And so I wanted to talk to you about how can we put her to work for good instead of evil? How can we transform her into an inner critic, to someone who provides inner guidance?
Well, I think our inner critic has a job, and she's just waiting for directions, which means that's where we come in to managing her. So for an example, a few years back, I was hired to come in and lead a keynote at Ford Motor Company. Now I'm in the Detroit area, so the big three, they're all housed right here. And it's just an expressway drive to get down to the world headquarters. Now, here's what I'm putting myself through. Oh my gosh, Kim, you have not been in corporate America in forever years. I think it was in my before life. So I had all that going on as I'm getting down the driveway. I'm not even to the expressway yet. So the dialogue I had to change is go, hey, sister, I need you here with me, but I need you in the back seat, not behind me so you can kick it, but in the back seat over on the other side, and manage all those emotions and sensations. She's looking for a job. And so she's like this little girl. Okay, I'm going to go back there and I'm going to keep everyone nice and happy because my true authentic voice gave her a job description, gave her something to do so that I could be clear and have a stronger dialogue with myself before walking in and delivering an hour-long keynote at Ford Motor Company. Mm-hmm. That's one of the secrets of managing her. And I believe that is how high achieving people raise up. They rise up and they raise up. There's got to be a point. no matter athlete, no matter, CEO, women like ourselves, we come to terms with that inner critic, or eventually it takes us down. It's like what you said, Fallon. I used to be so proud of never getting sick, but boy, when I got sick, it was hospital time, and there's such a proudness I think needs to be switched that, hey, I'm human. I catch colds, I get flus, I get sick, as opposed to I never get sick. And then when we do, so I think we do come to terms at whatever levels of our achievement with that inner critic and imposter syndrome and lack of worth in all of those.
One thing that as I become more and more senior in my career, I realize the shadow that I can cast on other people, and that the decisions that I make sometimes unintentionally set an expectation with other people. By not modeling the right type of behavior, by working nights and weekends, by not taking time off when I have COVID, if I do things like that, no matter how much I tell our team, no, I want that for you, and no matter how much in my heart I do want it for them, if I'm not doing it for myself, it's setting the wrong expectation for them. And I think we just need to be a little bit cognizant of that when we're making those choices as leaders. So I want to make sure that I draw out what you just said, because we're talking about some of the top tips to reprogram our inner critic and turn them into inner guidance. And one of the things is give it a job, define its purpose. So make sure that you define its purpose. And you've got some other tips too. What are the other tips for making that transformation?
Well, first of all, the first thing is we have to have that awareness. And that is like 50-60% of overcoming that inner critic and being able to make her your ally and manage her is the awareness. Because if you're not aware, and again, we live in a society like, let's pick the carpet up and let's sweep it under and it'll all be better in the next 5 minutes, or tomorrow it'll all go away, when quite frankly, it becomes olive oil feeding organic spinach to Popeye, and it just becomes bigger, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the things is the awareness. And the other thing is when you're in the midst of it, when she is starting to really chime, is to be able to either back away and go, boy, what do I need right now in this moment? For me, it's I got to get out of my office, my home office. I have to go either get outside for a minute. I have to go pet my dogs. I might have to go maybe chop or prep a salad for dinner, a time out. And what that does for me is, first of all, number one, it shifts the environment. And then number two, I'm able to get a little clearer and start having a more compassionate dialogue with myself, as opposed to you're a loser, you're never going to make it, oh my God, you're a failure, all that stuff that she likes to chime up. And is being able to, here's the utmost deepest thing when you're working, that I have clients do when when they're working with their inner critic, is to be able to get in a mirror. And start from the neck up. All right, come on, we're girls. Makeup, hair, we're in the mirror, brushing our teeth, right? To get into the mirror and start for like 5 minutes and look in that mirror and allow yourself to personally just say, wow, I'm pretty darn awesome. I'm magnificent. And then also to allow that brain go, I need to also tweeze the eyebrows and just bring yourself back. And then to be able to go from 5 minutes to 10 minutes to 15 minutes of having a compassionate dialogue, to go from your neck to eventually be able to stand in a full length mirror and accept every single piece of your body, your being, everything. Because we as women, society, we are supposed to look like skinny, 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 skinny. If we have a roll on us or an ounce of cellulite on us, or whatever the case may be, society tells us we're ugly and we're unacceptable. And that's that spinach feeding of the inner critic.
Yeah. And it's, the big one for me is, I missed that opportunity, or I said that weird thing, or I didn't do that thing, and I think about those things. I was joking with a friend over Instagram. It's like, I'm still thinking about awkward situations from high school. Those things still come back to haunt me at 4:00 in the morning. But we all have those,
Mhm.
right? Oh, I wish I had done this. Oh my gosh, I wish I didn't do that. But there's a certain amount of compassion, right? That was season 1 me. I'm in season 4 me now. I've changed. It's a different person. I'm not going to make those mistakes before. And, being compassionate with yourself to say, that was okay. You made a mistake. Apply the same level of compassion to yourself as you would somebody else. Because so many of us would never dream of being so awful or speaking to another human being in the way that we speak to ourselves. It would be unfathomable. It would be embarrassing and quite disgusting in many ways. Like, imagine if we had to say out loud all of the words that we say to ourselves to another person. It absolutely insane. So I love that piece. So the 3 tips that you've given us are, one is, the first step is to become aware, is to acknowledge the presence of the inner critic and just say, okay, I feel you here. But then 2, have a bit of an internal conversation. What's your job? What's your purpose? Make sure you get clear on the role that you want it to play. And then if they're getting a little bit rowdy, take a pause and give yourself the opportunity to look at things from a different angle and be a little bit more compassionate. And when we're talking about our job, and we've talked about this a little bit before the show, but sometimes our inner critic can also be our early warning system. People call it things like intuition, right? So can you talk a little bit about the role of intuition and even maybe how that is a part of getting a bold voice, getting in touch with what you want and you need? I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
So when we're in our heads too much, the inner critic, and I hear this with working with clients with, as they're doing presentations, public speaking. Oh my God, I'm so nervous. No, come out of your head. Let's get back down into our body, get into those sensations, of our body, which sensations could be scared and excited, scare-sighted. But when we're so blocked by that inner critic, we cannot possibly feel that true, authentic gut intuitive feeling. And a lot of times when the inner critic or the hag has been dominating and controlling you, you may get a glimpse of that intuition. But boy, that inner critic is going to go yank and pull it out and slam and double bolt lock that door and kick that intuition out in the cold winter months if you live in Michigan, and just keep you blocked from that. That's where our trueness lies, is that in that gut, the intuition in our bodies. That's a bold voice. This stuff we got going on up in our heads, that's fake. It's all false evidence appearing real that just can chime so loud. So in order to really truly embrace our bold voice and do it imperfectly and unapologetically, is like you're talking about mistakes. To me, there are opportunities. We're going to have another opportunity to do this over, and how can we show up bigger and better? And that is a bold voice when we are able to really listen to that gut, that intuition.
And it's interesting because the inner critic oftentimes will just overpower it, like you said. So an example that I can think of is, and many of our listeners, I'm sure that you can relate to this, how many times have you been participating in something when something inside told you, this isn't right, or I don't want to do this, or this doesn't align to my values, or something. But then instead of listening to your intuition and doing what your heart is telling you to do, which is stand up, say something, don't take this shit, then on the other side, the inner critic of, well, if you put a boundary in place, they're not going to like you. If people don't like you, it's going to impact on your ability to get stuff done. You can't be successful unless these people like you. And so why don't you instead push down that intuition, take the shit sandwich of life that's being served to you right now, and just tolerate this, because if you don't, you'll never get what you really want, because there's like this society tells us that we have to kind of suffer, or maybe we deserve it. And I hear that sort of situation happens all the time. I mean, you must see it a lot in your line of work.
First of all, you're starting to sound a little bit like Brene Brown, who I just adore. I love her work. And it's like what Brene talks about, getting down in the arena. We're gonna fall. We're in the arena, but yet we'll listen to the people up in the nosebleed section who haven't even come close down to the arena. And it's those societal pressures, and sometimes we have to pioneer and walk a walk with our talk that might not be favorable, that may be going against the grain of whatever the case may be. And that's where our trueness really lies. I love when people say to me, boy, you really march to a different beat of a drum. You've got your own drum. And I'm like going, yeah, I'm on track. Yeah, thank you. I'm sure my coaching practices are very unorthodox. I don't want to follow what everyone else is doing. It doesn't feel good, but we buy into what society says, unfortunately.
It's so true. We absolutely do. And something that I love about that, and something that I read about boundaries, and we've done a lot of boundaries work this season, is that just because somebody puts a boundary in place or expresses their true preference, they're doing it because that's what's in their heart, or they're putting a boundary in place because it helps them deal with the competing challenges, or it helps them prioritize their family or whatever's important to them. They're not doing it to make somebody else feel some kind of way. And however that person feels about it is on that person. And if we spent less time letting our inner critic worry about all the different permutations of how somebody else could think, feel, react, and instead just use our bold voice to state what we prefer and then deal with whatever happens, just imagine how much easier relationships could be, because so many times people get into conflict because they're fortune tellers or they're mind reading. Because they think, well, you feel, or, oh, well, if I do that, they're going to. I mean, how do you know, though? I mean,
yeah.
How do you know?
Yeah. Wait, give me that glass ball. If you can predict that. We don't know that. We don't know that. And those self boundaries are part of soul care. I love some self-care, but it goes into soul care. And those boundaries protect us. That's protecting our heart. That's protecting our time. It protects us. And we can't even begin to predict how other people are going to, let alone think, react, respond, and anything else. And that we just need to be okay. More than okay, we need to be damn great in where we are at, especially in this moment.
Yeah. And I mean, that hag, she screams if we feel like we've been wronged. Sometimes we will create a situation through our own doing, right? Because we don't put a boundary in place. We ignore our intuition. We don't do that thing. Next minute, we're absolutely kicking ourselves to death mentally because two things happen. Either one, how could I be so stupid? What's wrong with me? Or on the other side, demonizing the other person who's doing something, who doesn't even know that it's wrong because you didn't tell them that you didn't like it. How could they do that? I can't believe that they could do that. Oh my gosh. Well, is that really fair? And and you've got this resentment and hatred building up inside of you. And sometimes we project that onto another person, and that poor person might be walking around having zero idea what's happening inside your person because you didn't use your bold voice. So I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours. I'm having such a fantastic time. We might have to do a follow-up episode around, what is a bold voice and how do we actually get one? Because I feel like that's a really logical follow-up to this. But if people have been inspired to start working on that hag in the attic, which I'm sure they have been, what do you hope people walk away with from our conversation today? If they only had one piece of information to walk away with, what would you recommend?
Well, when they're aware of that inner critic really chiming up, is how about just pausing and taking a couple deep breaths? And by the way, breath is free. We don't have to go to the store to get it. It's with us all the time. I don't mean to be silly and minimize it, but just taking a couple of deep breaths Maybe asking yourself just a question. Is this really true? Is this really real? And I would love for someone, for all your listeners, after they do something like that, hopefully you can laugh at yourself, because there's nothing like laughter to really decompress and de-stress when that inner critic is chiming up a storm.
Absolutely, because sometimes the voice inside of us really is quite ridiculous. And if we did think about it, reframe it, we'd realize, oh my goodness, I can't believe I ever thought that. Thank you so very much, Kim Boudreau Smith, for sharing your big, beautiful brain with us today. It's been so wonderful learning from you. One of the things that I'm going to take away from today is that mindset really can be managed. And the first step is realizing that you lie to yourself. And so taking a breath, using the power of pause, and reframing things. For any of you who are listening and want to learn more about how Kim can help you find your big, bold voice, reach out to her via her website, kimbsmith.com, or LinkedIn. And we are so thankful that you've chosen to take time out of your busy day and join us. Come back every single Monday where we can meet more amazing guests like the magnificent Kim. Kim, thank you again. You're an absolute star. Have a beautiful Thanksgiving, which is coming up this week. Great. Well, thank you. And thank you, everybody. Thanksgiving wishes to you and your families. And we'll see you again next Monday.